Hi, I'm Angela. I have a husband with bipolar 2 disorder, my kids have ADHD, and I myself have struggled with depression. You're not alone. Well, today I'm so honored to have Shasta Hickman from A New Life Christian Counseling with us today. She specializes in trauma and grief and issues with relationships, and so I know she'll be a huge help to us. Today we're addressing what it's like to face disasters well. On any given day, I know that we might feel like, wow, I'm really handling this with such grace. And then the next minute, we're falling apart on the ground. And so I really know that there are some great ways to, give us a leg up on how to do this a little bit better than we may be doing this. It's been lasting for a while. And so, Shasta, let's just kind of get right to it. And I want you to help us to understand what's happening, kind of what are the symptoms, and what are some great tips for finding peace in the middle of this disaster that we're in. First, I'd like you to help us to understand, what's kind of different for us now than prior to the pandemic.
Yeah, so before the pandemic began, there was over 600,000 people seeking mental health care in the state of Washington. And we estimate that there was about 700,000 who needed care but weren't seeking care. And
On top of the 600,000?
yeah. So about half were seeking care and half weren't. And then the pandemic hit, and the closest thing we have to compare a pandemic to in modern times anyway is a natural disaster. And so in some ways, the pattern of the pandemic is following that of a natural disaster, like some of those hurricanes that have caused major flooding in our recent history, mudslides, wildfires, even a few years ago. Those have been able to be studied now. Of course, we had our own this past year. So about 4 to 6% of people in a natural disaster experience symptoms of PTSD. And those closest to the most dramatically affected areas, the numbers look higher, about 35% of people.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I know that, more information's out there about PTSD now, and we're understanding that PTSD shows up in a variety of ways. And disasters are one of the ways that PTSD shows up.
Yeah, it's pretty dramatic, I think, just in understanding, like maybe people would be more prone to PTSD if they have previous trauma in their life. And, it's not like some sort of exact pattern that every person is going to follow. And, each of us are experiencing this circumstance in different ways based on what's going on in our lives. And so, we have our regular life that, may have been difficult, and then add on to that all that is going on. And, we're in this cycle of trying to cope with it. And so it can be pretty difficult. I think in some of our previous videos that we've done in this series, we've talked about grief. And I think most of us kind of have, a cursory understanding of like the stages of grief. And I'd love for you to kind of go into different types of grief that people experience, because that's not maybe as well understood.
Yeah, I think it's important actually to understand the types of grief, because in particular right now, we are seeing some grief that maybe people have never experienced before. So some of the types of grief are complicated grief, or it might be called compound grief, where it's like multiple things happening. Traumatic grief, like maybe in PTSD, disenfranchised grief, ambiguous grief, and disoriented grief. And I think what we're seeing right now the most of is ambiguous and disoriented grief at the same time.
Okay.
And so ambiguous grief is when you've lost something, but it's not really gone. So we see this with a missing person, divorce, dementia, miscarriages, natural disasters like a pandemic.
Yes.
Ambiguous grief has a tendency to sort of freeze us. So we kind of get frozen or stuck, and it's hard to move forward with ambiguous grief.
Right.
And then
no ending to, like, there's no like, oh, this will be better at this time. And so we're just sort of like floating, like, oh, okay, so what am I supposed to do with this? I
and
hear
how do you grieve something that's not really gone? It's not over.
right.
Yeah.
You can't like be like, remember when this blah blah blah. There's no like processing it because you're just still in it, and no one is able to tell you it's going to be over at this time. I was actually watching the news this morning, and people are like, okay, so now that the vaccine's here, like, like, when are things going to get back to normal? We want a time, and it's like the medical, doctors are like, well, and it's like they still can't. They still can't like give you a definitive time. Maybe by, and it's just like, oh man, that's not what people want to hear. And so they're experiencing, like you said, ambiguous grief.
Yeah.
Then what is the other one that you had mentioned?
It's disoriented grief. And it has kind of a similar effect. It creates this paralyzing effect where the feelings of uncertainty and fear and what seems like a lack of motivation, they can't quite get going, more of that stuckness. And then what we've all heard over and over in the last 10 months is this like sense of survival mode. And that's a part of that disorienting grief.
Right.
Yeah.
I think everybody responds in a different way. Some people are like, okay, I'm just going to, like press on and keep going. And others are just like, I can't, I just can't seem to get past this. And I really need help just for like daily activities. And then others are doing like the up and down, like, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different reaction. And I guess I would like to encourage people that, to have the grace for yourself, because, we've never been through this. And, it's like, we do need to encourage ourselves as well as encourage others that there's no perfect way to, cope with this. And we all need, one another to be able to, keep going and press on through this difficult time. I think that people need some hope for how to face these kinds of disasters. And how do you see God impacting kind of our view of our circumstances, or, just like helping us to see things maybe in a little bit different light?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is the Holy Spirit is the great comforter, right? And so we have comfort available to us. And certainly we want to receive that comfort from God. And because God created us for connection, we're able to also receive some of that comfort through connection with others. And there's a lot of brain science that goes behind that idea that we're created for connection. It was fun going to a Christian college and learning about how science sort of proves what the Bible says. And there are these things called mirror neurons inside of us, and they create co-regulation. And I think the most relatable way to describe co-regulation is like with a parent and a baby. And so the baby's crying and the parent goes and picks up the baby and the baby stops crying. And something is happening that is not on the surface. Sure, maybe the parent's patting their back or rocking them,
right,
but co-regulation is happening between the calm parent and the upset child. And that's a beautiful picture of God and us, or even us with each other. And it's in that relationship that we find regulation, or that we can experience co-regulation. So like you said, we really need each other. And there really aren't like a lot of rules around this. We can get co-regulation through the phone, through the sound of the voice of somebody who cares about us. Through a screen like we're doing right now. It's absolutely possible to co-regulate. Yeah. And, even sometimes people can help us regulate with their words. So maybe even a text message can be regulating for some of us, a word of encouragement. And the way that our nervous system works, there's like a part that's like an activated part that's like the get up and go part of us, that work and exercise and stress management and problem solving. And then there's a part of our nervous system that's like the more rested part, where we're sleeping, praying, meditating, even digestion happens in that more rested part of our nervous system. And that nervous system regulates kind of that ebb and flow that we all have to navigate through the day, right? We have to be active, and part of activity is needing to eat, and then part of rest is digestion. And so all day long, we're going kind of up and down on that scale of the nervous system. But there's times in stress, like chronic stress or in a pandemic, where that nervous system can get stuck on or off. And so when we see how each of us are dealing with it, sometimes that's because of how our nervous system is either managing or not managing so well what's happening. So like if it gets stuck on, we might fill our lives with so much busyness. We also might experience really big emotions.
Right.
If we get stuck closed, we might start to isolate or numb out and not feel connected. And so that co-regulation piece can help get us unstuck either on or off.
Yes.
So connecting with others, connecting with God can help us to sort of balance back out.
Yeah, that really makes sense, just in, like you said, like a scientific way. And then knowing that God created us for connection, with him and one another. It's just so reaffirming of, our faith, knowing that, he was looking out for us from the beginning. This is, there's a reason that we crave that and need that. And it's for our best. And so don't give up on it is what I'm hearing you say. Like, this is an essential part of, connection is an essential part of being a human. Don't make it like it's no big deal. Don't put it to the side. It's essential. So
yeah, and unbeknownst to us most of the time, it's happening behind the scenes all day long, every day. Right. Becoming aware of it and noticing, am I feeling stuck on or off? And, what can I do? What are the things that would help me, get unstuck?
Right. Yeah. And I think that's actually a great thing to lead into my next question, which is like, what are the practical things that we can do to kind of care for ourselves and also be preventative in like not having that up and down, like, stuck in like, full force, just like the pedal to the metal, and then, the withdraw and retreat. Because then, we're really hurting either way, if in those extremes.
Yeah. The idea is that the nervous system would just go through those ups and downs, free flowing, and at a pretty regular, balanced pace. And so when we get stuck, then we do really have to do something to get unstuck. I think that the age-old science of an attitude of gratitude goes a long ways. That's one of the things. Yeah. So participating in a practice of gratitude every day is important. I think even just saying out loud, today I'm so grateful. The sun is shining. The sky is clear. Yeah. And acknowledging that there, even in the midst of the mess, there's something to really be grateful for. Right. And sometimes we have to stretch ourselves to find that, right? Some days are pretty tough, and there's always something to be grateful for.
Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm. That's so true.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of times we get so inward focused that like the gratitude does like pull us outward and helps us to kind of like look around at the people, in our lives. And then, obviously even, like you said, like the sun shining or the, blue sky, especially significant in the Northwest when we have that. And we actually do have that today.
Yes.
So people probably are feeling like they need to maybe get out of work a little bit, but that does bring us a lot of, like you said, regulation, because it takes us out of ourselves. And so that's pretty important. Yeah. What else can we do?
Yeah. So joy, finding the joy, just like the gratitude, we might have to dig deep to find it. And I think that there are things that can bring us joy every day. And so again, just sort of acknowledging that either through journaling or saying it out loud. Like today, the thing that brought me joy was my nephew said something funny and I laughed. And it just brought a smile to my face and made me feel better for a moment.
Right.
And sometimes that means that we have to cultivate joy. Maybe we watch a funny video or, do something that really brings us joy. But finding the little things of joy every single day. So these are daily things that will help us not feel so stuck or help us bring us out of some of that stuckness.
Yeah.
Another thing that we can do is check in with somebody. So touch base with somebody every day or check on somebody. So sometimes we're doing okay. And that means checking on somebody. Also, even when we're not okay, it can help us feel a little purposeful in life when we check on somebody. So a daily practice of just one person, check in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so true. The blessing that it is to someone else, and then, you realizing that you can make a difference in someone else's life. We had like a little family emergency last week, and I had a friend like deliver a meal, just like literally drop it off on my porch, and I was just like, with flowers and, and it was literally like the simplest thing, just some stuff from Costco. And it's like, you can't, describe like just the feeling of care and, of just being seen, all of those things. Just that. And then for her, I'm sure that felt like I'm making a difference, and definitely it is important and makes you feel connected, even though I didn't, it was dropped off. I didn't, get to see her, but of course we were, texting and talking on the phone. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. I think we all have a need and desire to be seen and heard and understood, right? And so in that moment, you felt seen and you felt understood. You had a need. And that is such a beautiful thing that we can create in a variety of ways. That's one way, right? Or dropping off a meal would be one way. But to be able to acknowledge another person is important.
So it's so important.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
And another thing is that we can let go of something, right? So we've all heard this idea about the new normal, and take it or leave it. I think there are things that we've had to let go of on a daily basis that aren't the way that they were. And so maybe just an outward acknowledgement of, I'm going to let that go today, right? So maybe on a normal day, there's something that you would get done. And because of the increase in stress and the way that we're having to live right now, you let that go, that it's okay to not do that today or for it to not be that way today.
Right. Kind of that expectation that we hold for things to be a certain way or to feel a certain way. That's super important.
Yeah. So one that you can kind of tackle, you get a 2-for-1 on this one, I guess.
Okay.
Is get outside and move your body. If you do them at the same time, that's your 2-for-1, right? So getting outside, breathing fresh air, even in the winter in the Pacific Northwest, you can get some sunshine. It is possible. Even if it's not sunny outside, you can still soak in some of like nature and the goodness of bright light outside, and moving your body. Both of those are key to regulation.
Right.
Something really amazing happens in your brain when you get outside and you move your body. Being with nature, being in God's creation, really promotes that sense of well-being, and the neurochemistry that happens in your brain releases those good hormones, and you just feel better, even with just 10 minutes of like a short, not like a workout, but just moving your body. Just a slow, leisurely walk outside for 10 minutes can make a big difference every day.
Yeah, like let go of the expectation that it's like, I'm burning all of these calories, or, it has to be something big, but like everyone can do a 10-minute walk. And so if that's all you can do today, then do it. I think I get stuck in, oh, well, I don't have that hour. Well, that's okay. You can still, get out there and do something. So
that's and sneak out there when the rain stops for like 10 minutes, right? Like
right.
Sometimes that's all you can get. And it's not always pleasant to go walking in the rain, but it might stop for a few minutes and you might be able to get a little bit of that good neurochemistry happening in your brain.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So the last one is about creativity. And I think that there's a lot of ways to engage your creative center. Some people love music, some people love art, dancing, but in some way every day take in beauty and creativity, because God is the master creator. He is so creative, and we're made in his image, and so are we. And we're not all creative in the same ways. We may not all crave art or see beauty in the same way, which is the wonderful variety that he made us.
Right.
And that engaging of creativity really helps process emotion. So when we maybe aren't even aware that like there's some emotion that's sort of stirring inside of us, engaging in a creative process begins to let some of that emotion out. Painting can be a really wonderful outlet that can be very soothing. Even if you're not painting an object, but just an abstract, like moving of paint around on paper or canvas can really begin to regulate our neurobiology. Singing and dancing, of course, are wonderful ways of engaging creativity. There's so many ways, even just coloring. Sitting down and with a coloring book and coloring has a very calming effect on us, which is so needed right now when there's a lot to process and that feels really hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, I love these ideas because I think they're so practical, and they're a way that really reflects like who God made us, I think. And that is an amazing, reminder that we're not in this alone. And I really appreciate you kind of breaking it down for us and helping us to know that there is something that we can do. And at the same time, we need to realize that rest is a huge part of, helping our bodies to process what's going on in the world, and knowing that, we don't have control over that, but we can address some of these things that are going on in a proactive way so that we can deal with facing this disaster a little more positively and proactively than maybe we have been so far. And so thank you so much for your tips, Shasta. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited. I know that people are really going to benefit from hearing this. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And a big thank you to His Heart for supporting this channel. If you want more information for you and those you love on mental health, go to mentalhealth.academy today.